This is probably going to be the worst game I play this year just due to how low the bar has been set. The poor gameplay alone is already enough, but the bland environments, ludicrous amount of quick time events, and constant technical issues make this a masterclass of a bad game. The only thing saving it is how hilariously over the top the setting is. But make no mistake, Ninja Blade is about a step away from being part of that pantheon of legendarily bad games. It seriously comes so close to being that bad. The story of Ninja Blade is all about these parasitic worms that infest humans and animals and mutate them into horrible abominations. They're not just mindless either, they're actively working towards world domination, and their sights are currently set on Tokyo. That's where this team of elite modern-day ninja come in. They seem to be a special task force made just to hunt down these alpha worms, as they're called, which is why it's ironic that the two top members are immediately infected. Our leading star, Ken, has to defeat his former squad mate and his master and stop the alpha worm menace. I don't think the presentation is too bad. It definitely gives me a Ninja Gaiden vibe in terms of it being about a modern day ninja in a big metropolitan city, which I think is pretty cool, and the over-the-top story is so stupid that it's actually fun to laugh at. Throw in some wacky monster designs and absurd acrobatics, and it sounds okay to me, in concept. That being said, a lot of the game is very generic and it quickly wears down on you how everything looks the same. The few times that there is a change in the environment is too little too late, and it doesn't last long anyway before you're back in the city. However, the cutscenes are pretty fun and they do have their moments.
Don't let the suit fool you, kid. I was in the trenches before you were even a daydream. I learned jujitsu from your own master, Kanbei Ogawa. Worms make me sick.
Quick time events aside, a big part of the fun of the game is in seeing the action play out. I kind of wish this was an animated movie instead because, man, some of this stuff is really ridiculous. It's pretty much just the presentation that manages to barely save this game. And by barely, I mean save it from getting a 1 out of 10 because everything else about this is downright horrible. The gameplay tries to imitate every other hack and slash game out there, mostly God of War, but you can see elements of Ninja Gaiden and Devil May Cry if you look for it. You've got light and heavy attacks, magic ninjutsu, you cycle between 3 different swords and 3 different magic types at any time, and juggling all of this is the key to victory. Or, in theory, that's the key to victory. In practice, you just mash buttons and you'll be fine. For the most part, you'll want to stick with either the basic sword or the great sword. The dual blades are totally useless outside of very specific situations where they're needed, like when a ton of bats swarm you and you don't have magic, or when you need to deflect projectiles. For that matter, you also need the great sword for armored enemies. So, great, basically color-coded enemy designs for combat, awesome. It's not as bad as that DMC reboot or like Chorus, but it's a design decision I never like. You can upgrade weapons down the line which unlock new combos and attacks, and most of these are pointless and just add fluff, but a couple of them are worth looking into. In particular, any attack that can be performed while blocking tend to be really strong. The ninjutsu magic is a joke. It's so frustrating how much it sucks. The big problem with it is that when you throw the giant shuriken in order to use the magic, Ken refuses to move until it comes back, or unless he gets attacked. This could have been a cool little addition to spice up combos, but since the game forces you to dedicate the attack's entire animation, it's also regulated to very specific use cases. You can probably tell just from the footage, but simply moving around in this game sucks. It's very sluggish, and a lot of attacks have a long wind-up to them that'll get you interrupted, usually by an enemy off-screen. It's something you get used to eventually, but it never feels great. Ninja Blade is just really poor to control, not to mention that all the combos are straightforward button mashing. There's no free flow or creativity to the combat, not like you'd find in Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden. You just spam the same moves over and over. It gets old fast, and the game is incredibly boring as a result. One of my biggest complaints, by far, are the unnecessary filters and effects placed on top of the visuals of the game. If you use up your entire magic bar, then the screen gets really blurry for way too long. It's so obnoxious and it hurts my eyes. Also, when you run at full speed, a constant camera shake effect is going on. In fact, I don't know if I've ever played another 3D action game with so much screen shaking. It is ridiculous. For such a short game, there are a lot of boss fights, and they all suck for one reason or another. One of the most common issues is that you'll have to wait for long periods of time until a boss leaves itself open. Sometimes there are little tricks you can employ, like using magic or reflecting the boss's own projectiles to deal damage more efficiently, but most of the time you really just have to sit there and wait. Couple this with the bosses having a ton of health, and all of these fights go on for way too long. They all take forever. Ambiguous hitboxes is another problem, and this crab boss is the absolute worst for it. Check this out. You take damage just from the boss shifting its weight. It's so stupid. Every tiny little movement is a possible attack with no telegraph. It forces you to play so carefully and rely on hit and run tactics, and that's not fun. This game already sucks enough, but there's more to go. Turret sections. I lost count of how many there are, and yes, they also go on forever. There isn't even much to say about this, you kinda just get what you see, but it's worth emphasizing how much of the game this occupies. Not nearly as much as a QuickTime event though. This is one of the big things that really defines Ninja Blade, like holy hell, there's more QTEs in this game than in Shenmue and God of War combined. And that's both sad and impressive. Every possible excuse, even as mundane as opening a door hatch, is used for a QTE. And if you mess it up just once, then the game rewinds and you gotta do the sequence over again. I can see this being handled a lot worse, like you just straight up get a game over if you mess it up once, but this is still pretty bad. It's a shame too, because what's going on in the background actually looks pretty cool, but you can't give it too much attention when the constant QTEs are going on. It probably sounds like I'm exaggerating, but believe me, the QTEs take up pretty much 50% of the entire game. And that finally leads me to the technical issues. To call the loading transitions jarring would be an understatement. The first time it happened, I thought I accidentally skipped a cutscene, but then it just keeps happening. They intended the game to be like this. It can get really bad during boss fights too. This scene transition is so sudden and then the boss immediately attacks and kills me. But for added hilarity, this actually happened twice when you have to fight the same boss again later in the game. And then go figure that the checkpoint was at the start of the previous boss phase. Oh god, give me a break. The camera will get caught on the geometry fairly often. Moments when the player is supposed to be clashing swords can look way off. This one boss fight stopped responding entirely and I had to reload the previous checkpoint. The whole game feels like it's barely held together with string and chewing gum. And add on the brainless AI, cheap bosses, and ridiculous amounts of pointless filler, and there is practically nothing about this game that's any good. I can accept it being a cheap knockoff of everything popular in the 2000s, but it somehow manages to be even worse than that by failing to understand what made some of those games good in the first place. Hell, the game takes place over the course of an entire week, but every single level is always at nighttime. There's nothing about this game that makes any sense. The only good things about this game are that most of the action sequences going on behind the QTEs can look cool, and some of the character interactions and dialogue can be kinda fun, but that's about it. At best, the gameplay is a generic hack and slash 3D action game with nothing special going for it, and at worst, it barely runs. The game chugs hard when there's too much going on. I played it all on the hard difficulty, which no doubt only added to my frustration, and I can assure you that it was not worth it. Even then, the game only took me about 10 hours to beat. It's a very easy game as long as you're patient and you can recognize and abuse enemy patterns. I feel like I went over nothing in this video and all I did was complain, but that's really the entire game. The whole thing is a mess. It's such a shame because just going off of Metal Wolf Chaos, for example, I know From Software is capable of more. I'm not too familiar with most of their older library, but I'm sure hoping that Ninja Blade isn't emblematic of their usual stuff. I want to believe that there are some neat hidden gems in there, but I don't know if I can stomach another one of these. Thanks for watching my review on Ninja Blade, and a special thanks to my good friend at Recommended Playing for lending me this game. Check out his channel, he's got some great stuff. And don't blame him for this one, I actually requested this game myself without realizing what I was getting into, and I really regret it. Seriously, this game is like right on the cusp of being about as bad as Ride to Hell or Sonic 2006. It's so bad.